everyone. Matthews Aurora is proud to be a member of the Order of the Golden Rule and to serve as the presenting sponsor of today's Leadership Summit. The Matthews Aurora Funeral Solutions team is focused on providing you with outstanding service and support and helping your firm better serve the families in your community. I'm looking forward to participate in this afternoon's programming, and I hope you will enjoy it and walk away with some helpful information, tools, and resources that can take your business to the next level. Enjoy the session.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Communication Across Generations. My name is Lily McMurrow. I'm a licensed funeral director and embalmer and licensed attorney. A little bit about where kind of the idea for this presentation came from that I think kind of helps frame the issue just a little bit is the fact that I have a small funeral home with my husband, my father-in-law, and a new apprentice. We do about 120 calls per year, give or take. And so we kind of are navigating what does that look like when you're kind of trying to find new employees, retain those employees, and find a way to all work together. Simultaneously, I am also the program director at Worsham College of Mortuary Science. Worsham is the fourth largest mortuary college in the country, so I really get this unique opportunity to get to see all the students that are kind of coming through and kind of to get to gauge what are their needs, their wants, their desires, and what kind of employees are they going to make, because what are they interested in? So for me, one of the things that I thought would be a really fascinating topic is to kind of start to look at how do we work together? In some of our funeral homes, some of these family funeral homes and just any funeral home across the country might have up to 4 different generations working together under one roof. That is 4 communication styles. That is 4 different ways of being and thinking and all of those things kind of culminating in your day-to-day life, which can also increase stress levels and all of those different things. My goal in this presentation is kind of to talk about not so much every single generation, but to really focus on kind of 1 or 2 generations, how they interact with each other and what things can be done that make it a little bit easier. Also, my goal is not to change how you run your business, not to cost you money or anything like that, but just to think differently. So that's our goal during this presentation. And I really hope you have a few takeaways throughout the time here. So let's frame the issue and kind of start of what's next and figure out, what is going on. So who is this new employee? They are the Millennials. And the Millennials are born between 1981 and 1996. They represent more than 1/4 of the nation's population. And if you think about it, Millennials are ages between 24 and 39 in 2020, and they now number over 87 million. They surpass the baby boomers, which make up about 76 million individuals, and age range 54 to 72, right around that range. I do have a confession to make. I am about as old as you can possibly be to be still considered a millennial. So I call myself kind of the elder millennial for you all, and hopefully can bring it so that I can help you to navigate this new world. If there's any confusion about the younger generation, that is Generation Z. The big qualifier between the Millennials and Generation Z, well, us Millennials, we like to live in our parents' basement and eat avocado toast, where the Generation Z really like to eat Tide Pods and things like that. That's really the defining factor between the 2 generations. And in moving forward, there will be some things that in jest that I speak of. And as we talk about the different generations, please know that I'm speaking in generalities, and there will be some people that absolutely fit this mold and some people that absolutely don't. And those communication styles, you're going to go, well, I don't know anybody who does that, or not everybody's like that. I completely understand and agree with you. This is really more about kind of just general kind of principles that I found kind of in my working with students and working with our employees. I'm going to start with the demographic comparison, because I think starting out with when we frame that issue and instead of just kind of talking about, anecdotal things about the different generations, I think talking about, the background of those generations helps to inform us in that conversation. So as I mentioned, there are 76 million baby boomers. 72% of those individuals are white or Caucasian is how they identify. And this is from the data from the US Census. We're going to juxtapose that to the millennial generation, where we have diversity defining the millennial generation. Here you have the millennials. They're an even larger group. They've got 87 million, but they're much more diverse. Only about 56% of them are white. And if you start to look at this and you start to see that makeup of the generation, this really starts to look different. So the employee starts to look different. The home life is a little bit different. So all these things start to play out. We also need to discuss women in the workplace, because here you have some interesting facts. 57% of women now participate in the labor force. That is the highest number ever, and that number is only increasing. Additionally, 70% of those women who are in the workforce have children under the age of 18, and those are the ones that are participating in the labor force. I mention that because we need to start thinking about, okay, what does that look like as far as pick up, drop off for kids after school sports? What does daycare look like? Sick days, all of those things. I mean, I would be remiss if we didn't mention, the fact that we're kind of coming out of, knock on wood, hopefully this pandemic, where a lot of families saw that their kids are now at home and somebody had to be home to maybe homeschool or to do different things. So we really had to think differently about schedules and what that looks like. We also know that most women are coming and working, have a two-partner house where both people are working. The American Board of Statistics and the American Board of Funeral Service Education, they are the accrediting body of the mortuary science schools. They noted in 2019 that 67% of the graduates were female. I will tell you that number is only increasing. We just had, we started an online program about a year and a half ago, and our most recent cohort that started in September, 80% female. Arapahoe College out in Colorado just graduated a class 100% female. They were the first group to do that. That was a couple of years back. So this number is only increasing. I really find that to be most likely because of the modality and the availability of online education, where, that traditional model of kind of coming to school, 8 to 2 or whatever that might be. This new model of being able to go online, we're finding that a lot more women are now participating in the mortuary science field. I'm going to jump into the American Board of Funeral Service Education graduate data, because I think that will help to inform a little bit more about kind of who's getting into funeral service, who your new employee who is out there. So who graduates from accredited programs? In 2019, we had 1,500 graduates. In 2018, about 1,600 graduates. Of that, as I mentioned before, 67% were female. 15% were children of licensees. 27% of the entire group was white males. So that is about 405 people of the 1,500. I want to point out that of that number, several of those individuals are going to be sons of funeral directors. So that number 405 is probably closer to about 350. That means nationally across the entire country. So if you have it in your mind that you have this certain individual that you want to hire and you think this is the person you're going to get, that person is going to be very hard to find and very hard to keep, because they're being sought after all over. I will point out that most of the women that are coming out of these programs are solid and have a really great background that I would highly recommend really looking into that. If your first question is, well, can they lift? I think you need to take a step back and start thinking about, can all of your employees lift? Is that really the defining factor? So thinking about that might broaden out your kind of pool, your applicant base as well. I want to point out kind of overall this trend of the number of graduates, because sometimes I hear this, oh, well, we don't have enough people joining mortuary science, or we don't have enough people entering the profession. I don't think that's necessarily true, because if you look at kind of the historic data, the number has been very consistent. You'll notice a little uptick in 1995. That uptick really kind of relates to when the associate degree became the credential that was necessary. So you saw a lot of people kind of come in right before that. And then you see that number kind of modulate back down to about the 1,500 range. And it's been pretty consistent. So it's not so much that people aren't getting into the field. That number has been consistent. I'm going to pause on this as well, because I think this is a really important detail to kind of spend a little time on, as far as the education that's kind of there before entering mortuary science. So about 58% of your students have 2 or more years of college prior to coming to mortuary science. So that means maybe they have an associate degree or they've taken some college credits, but it equals up to approximately 2 or more years. 22% of your graduates, or the students that are coming to mortuary science now, have a bachelor's degree or higher. So that means that they are coming to you with debt, real debt, not just mortuary science school debt, but actual debt that they need to pay back. And these are going to be either from four-year degrees, master's degrees, or just maybe, different associate degrees that they have kind of collected along the way. I mentioned that because when we're talking about salary and things like that, it's not enough to just pull a number from the sky and say, this is what we're going to pay you. It's also not enough to say, well, this is what I got paid. Times are a little bit different. And it's not that mortuary science school is wildly expensive. It is certainly expensive, and it is, an investment, but these students and your new employees are coming to you with a lot more than just that. Also important to note here is that 50% of your students and that your new employees that are coming out have worked before entering school. That means 50% of students coming into mortuary science have never had a job before. I'm not even talking about funeral service. I'm actually saying a job. They have not worked at the movie theater. They have not folded clothes at the Gap. They have not worked, which they have not scooped ice cream at the ice cream shop, or whatever job you have out there. They have not done that. So they're coming in right into education. And then I want you to think next step, they're thinking, I'm going to come work at the funeral home. Great. But they have absolutely zero professional training whatsoever. So I hope that's kind of starting to go, okay, well, that's interesting. The next fact here is 69% worked in funeral service related positions while in school. That could be wake attendant, that could be anything funeral service related. Now, the flip of that means essentially 31% of students have had no funeral home work experience prior to coming out into the field. So that does not mean that, you can't teach that or anything like that. But when you're thinking about, what's going on at these mortuary colleges? What are they teaching these students? They don't have this skill. They don't have this skill. They're coming to us a lot of times without that skill set. I will say on the mortuary school side, I will speak to this for just a moment, that many of us and many of the programs have started adding in, funeral observations, arrangements, different things that kind of get the students into funeral homes, or at least starting to work and think like funeral directors. But that is still a lot of work that needs to be done. That's a lot of mentorship and things like that. So again, these students are kind of coming to you, these new employees are coming to you just with less work experience. So you need to be mindful of that as being a trainer and mentor. Now let's talk about working with those millennials. So, we've joked a little bit about, they like to live in their parents' basement. Sometimes, they've been seen as lazy and entitled. And I mean, to even say that, look at, here we go on this Time magazine cover. We've got the me generation. Millennials are lazy, entitled narcissists who still live with their parents. So right out of the gate, we're already talking like, I know you love us, right? We are a vilified generation. So let's dive into this a little bit and talk about why so harsh to these poor millennials. Well, we are the baby on board generation. We are more protected than any other generation. And what this means more than anything is that if you think about it, we are the children of car seats. We are the children of helmets. We are the children of shoulder pads, knee pads, all of those different things. We don't want you to get hurt. And it's wonderful. And it's great. Seatbelts and car seats and all the things have been wonderful inventions, but also means that we are definitely, watched over. We are definitely protected. And that has only increased from the millennial parents, adding in additional protections and things like that, so that, we can really protect and make sure our children do not get hurt. We are the generation of the term helicopter parents, and we are overscheduled. I look at helicopter parents in two ways. Number one, most of us wanted to, our parents said to us, you got to get into college. And in order to get into college, what do you need to do? You got to play an instrument. You better play a sport. You got to be on some type of student council. You better, speak Mandarin and play tennis and do all these different things, whatever that looked like, kind of in your home. That idea was you better be kind of well-rounded so that you can go to college. So what that meant was we had schedules, and we knew where we were going to be at all different times, when homework was going to get done, when we'd be picked up, dropped off. I said, this is why the minivan was invented. I mean, you picked up one set of kids, dropped them off at their different destinations, and then picked them up. And that's pretty much how life was lived. I also talk about this idea of being a helicopter parent, where kind of jumping off of that baby on board. Gone were the days, many of you growing up might have been told, like, you go out and play during the summer or anything like that. When do you come home? Well, when it gets dark out or it's dinner time. The thought of doing that now, or to a millennial child, or, someone that kind of grew up in that generation, was absolutely not. We need eyes on you at all times. You better not leave the property. That white van, that sinister white van is going to pick you up and take you away. This idea that you could kind of, have this freedom and flexibility is gone. We have leashes on children now. Beyond that, if a child is seen at a park by themselves, do you know who's called? The police, Child Protective Services. So this idea that we are protected, people are watching us, this idea of kind of go at your own way and explore, not so much. We are the children of the first real economic recession after the Great Depression. We saw our parents lose jobs, pensions, stocks. I look at it like this, you look at some households, they might have had a grandparent where they stayed in that same job the entire time. And it was very much like, you know what, you do right by the company, they'll do right by you. Fast forward to their parents who are sitting around the dinner table talking about how they were left from their job or how they were let go, that the company doesn't care about them, that their money, their pensions are gone. They're now having to work a lot harder and longer than their parents had to. So this real kind of transition from, we always want to have our children be in a better place than where we are. Well, that generation, we started to see the older generation being able to retire and do those things. And then the younger generation, kind of our parents, the millennial parents, not so much being able to do that. We also are the generation of Columbine and 9/11. Columbine was the first real school shooting. And I remember kind of how everything just kind of stopped. Again, we had this very safe, structured place where everything is supposed to be okay at school. And now it's not. People are coming in guns. Where are we safe? How can we protect our children? Fast forward now, I have two young ones. I have a little one that just turned 7 and just turned 10. Part of their, now they do fire drills, but they also do active shooter drills. So this has become commonplace. These ideas that these pockets of safety have been taken away really start to add up for this generation. In addition, you have 9/11, the first real terrorist attack on US soil in how long? Real loss of life. And kind of even now, as we look at that 20th anniversary that just passed, that question. So where were you? What happened? That is still raw 20 years later. That changes you. It changes your perspective and how you feel about kind of everything. We are also known as reward-based, or those participation trophies, right? How many of you heard, all these millennials and this younger generation, I think they're all snowflakes. They want a trophy for everything, a participation trophy for showing up. Pause just for a moment, because I'd like you to think about, when we were children in kindergarten, young toddlers running around. At no point was it us who said, hey, can I get a participation trophy? It was our parents that said, you know what? My Jimmy's just as good as Sally. Why are we not recognizing all of them? Everybody showed up. Everybody should be treated nicely. Let's give everyone a trophy. It was not the children that were saying, you know what, we deserve something. It was our parents. So this idea of being unique and individual, that was brought to us by our parents. I would love for all of you that are out there to think about how many times you told your children, if you dream it, you can do it. Follow your passion. If you love life, you'll be able to do what you want, right? All these things, we want you to be an individual. All these kind of things that we grew up with. Well, guess what? That has real consequences for the employees as they grow up and go out into the world. And that's what we'll start to transition and talk to you about too. We like visual examples, less text. The best example I can give of this and kind of thinking about it is we're the generation of the value meal of, what number do you want? Pick a picture. I want number 1, number 2, and you can see what it is. So right away, we started less communication as far as having to list out all the items that you wanted. Really came down to, I want a number 1, you pick out the drink that you want. And I guess what the question for us as kids was, are we going to supersize that, right? That was the big discussion point for us as well. But for the most part, this idea of decision making, it was no longer reading a menu, it was just picking the picture. And that you can see that trend still here. If anything, continuing on, you have tweets that are 140 characters or less. So being very kind of technical in what you're saying and quick. And then we're looking at things like Instagram, TikTok, Vines. Instagram is completely visual based. I mean, you can certainly write different things, but the actual thing itself is about the picture. So this is really kind of carried through, I think, even to the next generation as well. I put this low tolerance for boredom, and I think this kind of goes across multiple generations, but I think you start to see it first in the millennials because we have this access to kind of technology. We've grown up with technology. For the most part, my entire life, I've had a computer in my home. I've had access to some type of like digital technology. So to me, this idea that you can always have something to do is something that is very real for this millennial generation and younger. Let's talk a little bit about the values that you see across the millennials. And again, as I mentioned before, this is certainly speaking in generalities, but I think there's a lot kind of takeaways that can be hopefully taken from this. So one of the things that we hear a lot about is work-life balance. If your eyes are rolling back in your head right now, stop, stay with me, I promise, for just a moment. If you're thinking, oh, work-life balance, I didn't get work-life balance. We're really talking about work-life balance. And the idea here is that they value personal relationships, community engagement, travel, and they want time to pursue their outside interests. I'm going to say this, because a student came into my office, new apprentice, she came in and spoke to me and she said, I really want work-life balance. And I, like you, started like in my mind was like, what? Like, you don't get work-life balance. You just start. And my mind started doing this, right? Like all over the place. And I thought for a moment, I never asked her, what does work-life balance mean to you? So I stopped and I said, what does work-life balance mean to you? What are you looking for? And she said, you know what? I'd really love to have dinner with my mom. She's home by herself on Wednesdays, and I'd love to be able to spend some time with her as she's getting older. I thought, that's your work-life balance. You don't want every weekend off. You don't want to make your own schedule. You don't want to do this. You don't want to do that. No. And I thought right there is one of those communication things that's happening that we can certainly start to kind of step back from, which is ask the questions instead of answering it for yourself and kind of, thinking, oh, work-life balance and triggering all those things that it means to you. Think about it from their perspective or ask the question. And I think that's just an important piece. They want time with their family and flexibility. This idea of work smarter, not harder. So this idea of time with family and flexibility, to me, that's having the conversation. What are the things that matter to your employees and especially the younger ones? Is it the dance recital, the soccer game? Is it the pickup, the drop off? What is it? You might not be able to have all of those things happen for them. Are there certain holidays that really matter to them, one more than another? Do everybody at the office, does everybody work holidays equally? Do you kind of match them? Whatever your policies are, you want to explain those, but at the same time, have them as part of the conversation so you know what matters to them. This idea of work smarter, not harder. This is the best way that I can explain this to you all is if your response to your employee is because I said so, or that's how we've always done it, that is a bad answer. That is a bad answer, and it means you have not thought it through. You need to be able to explain why it matters. So for example, if you have somebody at the funeral home 24/7 to answer the phone, let's say you don't use any type of answering service or anything like that. Fine. Why? If someone asks you why you do that? If your response is, well, we've always done it that way, not a good answer. You need an explanation. Now, if you're sitting there going, well, I don't need to explain myself to anyone. Yes, you do, because the millennial generation, the younger generation, forever have been taught to ask why and to think differently. If you don't have that conversation, they're going to start to think, well, this is just busy work. They're forcing me to do something I shouldn't have to do. Why? And then their minds start going kind of crazy. And this is what I want you to think about. If it matters because, you know what? We want that first voice that a family hears to be our voice, the voice of this funeral home, because what we do matters. And we want to show them that we're here 24/7 and we say that we mean that. Okay, if that's your answer, that's what you need to tell them. What is the value that's attached to that? Because that's what a millennial and a younger and Generation Z want to hear. Why, how am I part of this fabric and how do I matter within it? I put kind of a little joke cartoon up here, which is the boomers schedule 9 to 5, 9 to 5, and our millennials who are like 10 to 8, 2 to 12. I understand that in funeral service, like there's never 9 to 5, but the point here is, can they write the obituaries at home? Can they scan the photos at home? Can they do some work from home? Does it all have to be done on site? If the answer is no, fine, but just explain why. What about their needs? They really have a need for recognition and appreciation. Millennials need feedback such as small rewards, titles, and non-monetary rewards. This is, to me, recognition. They want to be seen and they want to know that they're doing a good job. This does not mean it's all sunshine and rainbows and every single day is like, you're amazing. It's not that. But what it does mean is that you acknowledge their presence and what they're doing. And it's because they're very used to that. They're very used to that type of feedback and a consistent feedback as well. You have here a tweet. My daughter's looking for a summer job. She's a millennial, so she's hoping to find part-time work as a CEO. This idea also of small rewards, something as simple as this. We had a student, many local funeral homes around us will hire our students to do wake duty, different things like that. Well, we had a student working at a funeral home. They came back, and that day had been a blustery winter day. We're right outside of Chicago, and blustery winter day. They came back and came into the school, and they said, I had a great day. And everyone's like, well, what'd you do? What'd you do? He said, well, I had to park cars outside. And he goes, you're never going to believe this. Guess what I got? And wouldn't you know, he takes out of his pocket and holds above his head a Subway gift card for $20. You would think he got a $500 bonus. And all the students went like this. Ooh, I mean, it was just like you would not believe. Now, at the same time, guess what else is happening simultaneously? Other students are going this. I never got anything from my funeral home. So we're not talking about this huge investment or anything like that. Also, really big deal is something just as simple as saying, hey, you know what? That family that you helped out with, they thought you did a great job. Passing that positive feedback along to them goes a long way. They want to feel like they're making a difference. I also have this little cartoon here. You've got your boomers. If you didn't want it that way, you should have done it yourself. And we have our millennials who said, do you like my work? Which part did you like the best? Do you like it a little or a lot? Is it amazing what I did? I love this one in particular because I work with another millennial, and he had me look at one of his presentations to kind of go through and give any feedback. And his question to me was, what part did you love the most? And I thought, yes, you are such a millennial. Because yes, here's the thing. We do like positive, positive feedback. We do like constructive criticism as well, but that positive feedback really does matter. It bolsters that support and makes them feel like they're doing a good job. Coaching and mentorship. I can't stress this enough. Millennials want to develop their skills and know how they're progressing. I think sometimes we forget that at the end of the day, they want to be you. The people that are coming into this profession, the students that I see, the new apprentices, the new employees, that millennials or Generation Z, they want to be funeral directors. They want to be you. The number one reason why someone stays in their job is their mentor, is their boss. It's also a reason why they leave. So this idea that they're asking you questions, they want to know more about it. They want to kind of be around you and develop their skills. So this idea of advice, training, leadership, all those things kind of come together. They don't necessarily want to own the funeral home. I think a lot of times they'll say, well, you could have this and own this. No, they don't necessarily want that. What they want to do is feel like they are connected to you, that they're learning and their skill set that they're growing, and that you believe in them. Those are some of our best students. They're the ones that funeral directors send to mortuary school because they believed in them. Somebody believed in them. Progress reports. Millennials, Generation Z have been getting progress reports since the time they were in preschool, parent-teacher conferences. There's always been this kind of status of like, how are you doing? What are you meeting, exceeding? Like, where are you kind of on that spectrum, and kind of where are you going, as far as like making progress, things like that. Remember, 50% of them have never had a job before. So they're coming right out of that experience of being, I know how I'm doing here. I've got grade reports. I've got this. I've had sit downs with my teachers, to no news is good news. They can't operate like that. They don't know any better. You're taking away kind of all those kind of foundational pieces that mean a lot to them. So this idea of progress reports does not need to be weekly. It can be whatever it is that makes sense for your funeral home or kind of your business, so that they're feeling kind of consistent. If you have to cancel one, which happens because as soon as you have something on the books, it's like the phone starts ringing like crazy. Just reschedule it. Make sure that it doesn't get too far out and that it doesn't become something that doesn't happen. You need to make sure it always comes back to, and you're meeting with them at some point in time. What are some of the challenges that you're going to face? To me, communication. Millennials and kind of younger, the Generation Z, often resent being handed busy work. Take the time to explain how their work will lead to specific results. Here's a story that kind of illustrates this. We have a new student that's working at a funeral home. Her job is to stuff envelopes. Fine. She comes back telling everyone, oh, so awful at the funeral home. I have to stuff envelopes. This is so demeaning. This is terrible. I shouldn't have to do this type of work. I am in mortuary school. I should be able to do so much more. So I hear all this, I pull her aside and I said, well, have you asked, what is it that you're doing? Have you asked about this? So she goes, no, So she goes back, has that conversation. She comes in the next day, the same student. And now she's going, you're not going to believe what I get to do at the funeral home. Every so often, we send out cards to the families on the 1-year anniversary of the death of their loved one, and then the 6-month anniversary. And I get to put those cards together and mail them out. It's absolutely beautiful to be able to do. So did the task change? Not at all. Is she still stuffing envelopes? 100% she's still stuffing envelopes. But now she knows why. So instead of just saying, go do this, this is what I asked you to do, that little explanation, that little bit of detail has taken it to something that she can feel proud of and part of versus just go do this task. It matters. And I know you might be sitting there going like, really, do I have to explain everything? To me, this idea of cohesion and this idea of kind of building that camaraderie, it does matter, because for so long, this generation and younger have had a seat at the table and their opinions have mattered. They have been heard. And we'll talk a little bit more about this, but to feel like they're part of something and giving back, they want, I mean, think about it. When you look at advertisements and things like that now, they really start to target the millennials and Generation Z about what good the company is doing, how they're giving back, how they're serving their communities. It's the same thing that you're doing as well. They want that same type of kind of feeling in the place where they work. They also have different modalities and ways of communicating. You sitting out there are going to be bosses, owners, and there's some employees out there as well. You get to set the tone. How do you want them to communicate? If you don't want a text message, hey, I'm not coming in today, I'm sick, then you need a policy that says that. They will call if they need to, but I'm going to tell you what, they're most likely going to text. So if you don't like that mode of communication, you need to say something. I will also tell you, most millennials and Generation Z don't have their voicemail set up, and they're not going to. They would rather die than take a voicemail. I, at any given time, probably have like 2 voicemails sitting in my inbox. My sister, who's a little bit younger, has maxed out, I believe, the full number of voicemails that can possibly fit in that box. And then you have others that just have never even set it up. You can't even leave a message. And I know that's very frustrating. So if you get a resume or something like that and they can't leave a message, you can text them, you can email. I mean, so it's different modalities, different ways. If you have a policy of how you want things done, you need to communicate that to your newer employees. I love this. Here you have your boomers where you have, hi, Alan, how are you? I just want to get in touch. Please let me know and be a good time to meet up. Feel free to let me know at your convenience. If you'd like to set something up on your calendar, best, Joe. To our millennial, which is, hey, hi, when are we going to meet? Emoji, 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 pizza, fries, TTYL. I love this one in particular because, as I mentioned, we have a funeral home, and we have, at this point in time, we've got someone from we've got a boomer, we've got a Generation X, we've got a millennial, and we have a Generation Z. So we actually have 4 generations working together. And our apprentice actually sent my husband a text that was all emojis, and my husband just looked at me and he goes, "Is this good or bad? I don't know. I don't know what this means." And I started laughing and I looked at it and I said, "Oh, she's good to go. Everything is great." He goes, "I don't speak emoji." I said, "Not to worry, we can learn." But again, this just kind of highlights that point where, they've kind of taken over that kind of conversation, making sure that if you have certain things that are important to you, that you set that tone for your employees. I love this. This is for my boomers. Thank you for calling to say that you have faxed an Excel spreadsheet back to me with your handwritten notes. True story. I have had I just wanted the Excel file. That's all I wanted. So I could make changes on the spreadsheet. This individual printed that Excel sheet, scanned it into a PDF, and then wrote on it with pencil. And I thought, okay, that's a lot to undo right here. It's a lot of work to undo. So you boomers out there you're not alone. We can make fun of you as well. You're not perfect. As far as motivation goes, flexibility. Allow millennials to blend kind of work with the rest of their lives. A flexible schedule, casual work environment makes it seem less like work and more like fun. Before you start going, well, this is a serious profession. Believe me, I love this profession probably more than you could ever imagine. I get up every day excited to do this, and I know that work is not always fun. But what I mean by this is we need to think about our employees as having lives outside of the funeral homes. And what is that? Is it book club? Is it something as simple as they might want to do book club once a month? Can you find the time for that? There's one employee, this is a gentleman in Wisconsin, loves community theater, and he wants to participate in one play a year. Can your funeral home work around a schedule like that to allow that? Because guess what that does? That shows that you are putting value and interest into what they're doing, and then you're giving that back to them. And that's creating that loyalty. That is an intangible that you cannot put a price on. Clarity. A clear career path and clearly laid out goals helps them make them feel like they're in control and what they're working towards. As I said before, they are not so interested in kind of owning a funeral home. So if you're like, this could be yours, guess what? That's going to raise their anxiety up like this, their stress levels up like this, and they're going to go, nah, no, thank you. So again, actually having that conversation, what is it that they want to do? Do they see themselves working more, in the back room, in the front room? Do they want flexibility to move around, between jobs? Do they love working with families? Nurturing that and kind of allowing them to see where their talents lie. I think that to me is what this clarity means. Encouragement and regular feedback. They want to know how they're doing. The other part to motivation is making them feel like they're part of something. And I've mentioned that before. And I want to talk about it a little bit differently. One of the things that funeral directors will call and say to me a lot of times is, these millennials, they just, when they're done working, they're done. Like you give them a task list, they don't look around and see what's next. They don't do anything else. As soon as it's done, next thing I know, and I'm gonna show you my phone, the phone comes out and it's this, right? And I said, okay. I said, well, think about it like this. Many of those employees, your younger generation, they've grown up with what's called a rubric. And so as soon as you give them an assignment at school, you say, you hit all of these different things. Guess what? You get an A. You get an A. So you've given them that task list. And guess what? They did everything on that. Guess what? They got an A. They are not looking to see what's next because they did everything that you asked. So their mindset is not to look around. And believe me, I worked for my grandparents growing up, and I had a grandfather whose motto was, if you've got time to lean, you got time to clean. So believe me, I come from and I understand where you're all coming from. But this idea that they're going to just look around and go, you know what? I should do more. Yeah, they already got the A. They already got the A. So if you're sitting there going, well, then what do I do? Because that's not working for me. I have a couple suggestions. Number one, after they complete that task list, add something else to it so that they can kind of enhance that. Next part is this. You ask them, you know what, you've been here a couple weeks, a month, whatever that time frame is for you. You've done a great job. You've been able to complete all these task lists. What do you see that's missing? What could we add to this task list for you to do that you've kind of noticed in your time here? Because they might have noticed something that you hadn't. They might suggest a task that you wanted them to do already, but now they're doing it for themselves. Now they're invested in it and they're making their own task list. So it's not that we throw that task list and rip it up and go, I guess they just do what they want. It's not that. What it is now you're adding them in and having that part of that conversation with them as well. And here we have a millennial who accepts constructive criticism. Now that's something you don't see very often. There's a level of truth to that. You want to be very kind in how you present that information, but at the same time, you do need to give them the criticism as well. As we're kind of winding up here, I have kind of my top 10 that I think is kind of the most kind of takeaways that I'll spend a few minutes on each kind of talking about with you as we kind of finalize our time. Number one, provide structure. This goes back to the fact that, like I said, a lot of them are coming out and they don't necessarily have, work experience. So this might be their first job. And I want you to think back to when you started. Were you ready to go? Did you know everything? Were you completely professional? Something structured, even as simple as the dress code. I want to highlight this one story because I think it speaks to kind of the students that I see and kind of then and them as employees. We have a lot of different events on campus and kind of outside as well. One of the things we do is take all the students to a cemetery to kind of view a burial. We ask them to dress professionally. I get to school that day and I see a student and she is in flip-flops. And I thought, that is not my definition of professional, not even close. So I look over, I pull her over, I ask her, hey, the shoes here. And she goes, oh, do you like them? These are my fancy flip-flops. And in that moment, and I looked down and you know what? They were wedged and they were bedazzled and they were beautiful. And they were certainly fancy flip-flops. In that moment, it dawned on me. She wasn't trying to bend the rules or be malicious or do anything like that. She really just didn't know. She had no kind of point of reference as far as what professional really meant. So for her, that meant fancy. And to her, that was the flip-flops that she had. So we started just instituting a Dress for Success program to kind of talk to the students, but maybe they didn't go to Worsham or maybe they don't have that kind of background. they're coming to you. So that type of explanation, that type of conversation needs to happen. As simple as this, we have a policy, closed-toed shoes. Makes sense. We know why, right? Student arrives and on one of her first days on the job at the funeral home, and she's wearing UGG boots. For those of you who don't know UGG boots, they are like a slipper boot. They are nothing that you would consider possibly even remotely appropriate for a prep room or any of the work that we do. Super comfortable and cute, but not for what you want to do at all. So what did I do? I had to have a conversation. I said, you know what? Lovely shoes, but you need to have, rubber soles, closed-toed shoes. And this is why. Explained it. Guess what? She went home, changed her shoes, never had a problem again. This idea of providing structure and that kind of those conversations, I'm going to say it like this. You do that. If they don't listen, they're bad employees. It has nothing to do with their generation, has nothing to do with that. They're bad employees. You can get rid of them. But a lot of times it's just those conversations. Instead of rolling your eyes and kind of going like, why don't they know these things? Sometimes they just don't know. Provide the leadership and guidance. Forget that no news is good news. They need that type of that feedback and knowing how are they doing? How can they improve? Because if you don't tell them, they don't know. And then if you're feeling like they're not doing what they need to do, how will they have that information to become better employees? Those are hard conversations, but those hard conversations are where the growth happens. And that to me is what really builds that loyalty and trust of why they will stay with you. Encourage their can-do attitude. Guess what? Like I said, they want to be you. They want to be there. They want to get right in. They're excited. They're like, what can I do? How can I change everything? I'm so excited. Tempering that enthusiasm, but at the same time, are there different things that you can give them that they can be a part of? Something as simple as, maybe a coat drive at the funeral home. Maybe you have them participate in, a can drive or a community event. Maybe they're reading at the local school, whatever it is. Can you give them something that kind of inspires them to kind of get the name of the funeral home out there, but still with some parameters on that as well? Encourage them to give their opinions and ideas and listen. So this to me is, I know some of you might be sitting out there going, no, their opinion, no. This woman has said so many things. I know. Hear me out on this one. From the time that they are little, and I want you to think, how many of you have grandchildren, children, whatever it might be? How many of you ask them, what do you feel like for dinner tonight? And are surprised, or maybe not surprised. I have a 6-year-old or 7-year-old, and I might ask her and she'll say, macaroni and cheese and French fries, right? Double carbs. Who wouldn't want that? Am I surprised that she didn't say a kale salad, or a banana smoothie? No, I'm not surprised at all. Of course she wants sugar, carbohydrates. Yes. But we've been asking these children, what do you want? Asking them their opinion since the time they were little. That cannot just get shut off right when they come to the funeral home to start working. So at least asking them that question to give their opinions, to me, that's having a meeting and having them be a part of it. Do you have kind of whatever that looks like so they can voice their opinion and you listen? Doesn't mean you act on it or you have to do everything they say. It just means they're part of the conversation. Providing work-life balance. This does not mean that they don't work every weekend, that they have every holiday off. What this means is you have a conversation. Are there some things in their life that are important to them that you can support and that you can help them to achieve? That's work-life balance. Create an environment that challenges. What this means to me is, why do they want to come every day to work at your funeral home? Why do they want to work with you? What makes you unique, special, different? And to me, that is you're consistently thinking about growth. And not growth as far as just the size, but as far as professional growth. Development, different things like that. And that's why it goes right into the next one, which is provide those opportunities for networking and professional growth. This is so important. When you think about it, we are a profession of 20,000 individuals across the entire country. We do work that pretty much nobody else can do. We have been tasked to deal with the dead. That is a very unique subset of a profession that not a lot of people can do. So when we find our people, right, the other people doing this work, and with a one word of saying, or that kind of one sentence of saying, I had a day, and having people get that and understand you, those kind of communities, that matters. Your new employees need that foundation. They need to know who the people are that they can talk to. And that networking doesn't have to be anything that's grand, but something as simple as, Are they participating in, different things that OGR has to offer? Are you having them kind of do different things in the community? And then are they able to kind of go to different conventions, things like that? There are also a lot of fantastic opportunities online for connection and networking and growth. So it doesn't have to be this expensive thing either, but giving them outlets to connect with other funeral directors, especially people their own age, is really important. Do not mistake why for disrespect or undermining your authority. I'm going to pause just a moment on this one because it really, really matters. We've been taught to ask why, question and ask why. To me, why is curiosity. It is not questioning you. It is not asking, well, why are you doing it that way in a negative way? It's asking, oh, that's really interesting. Why are you doing it that way? And I think for, when you have a new employee that kind of comes in and they're like, why are you doing it like this? Oh, well, that's not what we saw in school. That's not what this person does. And that's, it starts to almost feel like they're saying to you, like you're doing something wrong. A lot of times, I would say 9 times out of 10, that why is curiosity. It's interest. It's they want to know, oh my gosh, I've never seen someone do a stitch that way on that. Why did you do that? Oh, I never heard anyone say that to a family before. I love that. Why did you say that? Think of it as curiosity, not questioning. Acknowledge their impact. This can be as simple as you did a great job. If they do something right, acknowledge it, because you're going to have to acknowledge when they do something wrong as well. But that softens that for every time that they make an impact. If they did something, really wonderful at work, just let them know it matters. Create a work environment that's positive and constructive. This to me is that building of trust and rapport, because what you want is you need them to show up for you at the 2 o'clock in the morning phone calls. You need to know that if something goes wrong, that they trust you enough that they're going to call you and say, hey, I made a mistake. They're not going to be afraid of you. They're not going to say, you know what, I'm just not coming in. Never mind. True case, where individual went and picked up 2 bodies. Both obviously, both had both white female. Toe tags were not fully attached. Those toe tags fell on the ground. 50-50 chance. One's a cremation, one's a burial. Is that employee going to call you at 2 a.m. and say, hey, I made a mistake. I don't know who's who. Are they going to try to figure it out? Or are they just going to tie those tags on and hope for the best and say, not my problem? To me, that positive and constructive work environment is getting to know each other. Do you know their dogs' names, their kids' names, birthdays, things like that? Just simple stuff that makes a difference. And I know, as we're winding up here, you don't want to be parents. I get it. I really do. You don't have time for that. You're running businesses. You have your own lives. You have all these different things. But asking for mentorship and professional development is not parenting. It is part of our job. And what happens if you invest in developing your new people and they leave you? It can happen, and it does. But what happens if you don't and they stay? That to me is just as bad, if not worse. Some final thoughts as we kind of leave today. We have our boomer generation, 1976. The New York Magazine says the me decade, the now generation has become the me generation. Got our Generation X, another Time magazine cover, the 20-somethings. They have trouble making decisions and have short attention spans. They'd rather hike the Himalayas than climb the corporate ladder. Starting to sound a little bit familiar, right? At the end of this, I hope you start to see that all those things start to sound very familiar, right? Every time we have a new generation entering the workplace, anytime we have different kind of generations communicating and working together, there's going to be friction and tension and all those different things because we're learning those new styles. We're learning the different ways to communicate. We're learning about the different ways in which we can work together. It is my hope that there have been a couple takeaways for you that you were able to kind of institute at the funeral home or any type of ideas, things like that. As always, please reach out if you have any questions, comments, things like that. I'm always interested in hearing stories of things that are going well, things that are not going well. Sometimes you just need a sounding board of someone to talk to. Please, my information will always be available through OGR, and I hope all of you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much.
In 1893, A.J., along with his son Walter, began the Dodge Chemical Company. In 1929, the first branch office and warehouse opened in Los Angeles, California. In 1934, the Dodge Chemical Company Limited opened in Canada. In 1951, a second branch opened in Fort Worth, Texas. In 1974, the entire operation moved to Cambridge, where it remained for almost 40 years. In 2013, the Dodge headquarters moved to Billerica, Massachusetts. Today, the company is run by Mike's daughters, Debbie and Christy Dodge, along with an outstanding management team. We operate a fully staffed lab for quality assurance, future development, and testing of new products to produce and develop the leading chemicals in the industry. The Dodge Man is a term by which funeral service has identified our sales representatives for decades. It characterizes a familiar face, a familiar company, and a way of doing business. Dodge continues to innovate and has developed the most widely sold embalming machines in the world. Some newer innovations include the Dodge waterless aspirator and the Evolution injector. We continue to develop new chemicals and solutions for our customers. You can rest assured that disc spray meets and surpasses the CDC recommended threshold of 70% alcohol. In addition to being a leader in the industry, Dodge has partnered with some of the most innovative and creative companies serving funeral service. Since the beginning, Dodge has been there to help you make all the difference.
Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Bailey with Story Collaborative, and I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for having me today. Today's message is for funeral professionals who want their digital marketing to be amazing, but don't know exactly what to do or how to get there. So before we get started, I'm going to tell you a quick story. Raise your hand if you've ever felt awkward in a new crowd of people, maybe not knowing what to do or say. You can raise your hand, nobody will see, and I'm going to raise my hand because that was me 15 years ago, the first time that I encountered a funeral director. Now, I was at a small business networking meeting, and I remember him because he was wearing this beautiful emerald green suit and tie, and he had this smile that you pretty much would not forget. Well, he really got the attention of the whole room because he said, "I love being a funeral director, although it's quite the undertaking." And so, of course, the whole crowd laughed. But I still didn't exactly feel comfortable approaching him at the time because it was just a little bit out of my comfort zone. So a little bit later, I got invited to the funeral home to bid on a marketing project. And I'm a kid fresh out of marketing college, and I was very excited to get the interview. So, of course, I went to the funeral home, and I was wearing like a new blazer, and I was clutching onto a notebook. I was so nervous. And I remember one of the first things that the funeral director said was kind of like drinking water out of a fire hose, because he said, "Would you like to take a tour of the crematorium?" And of course, at the time, I did not really want to take a tour of the crematorium, but my eyes gave me away because it was like deer in headlights, right? But regardless, I got the gig anyway. And it's just that they really wanted to give me a chance. And what they didn't know is that this opportunity was going to propel me into a brand new way of thinking about funeral services. About 10 years later, I went back to that funeral home, but not for business. I went to celebrate the life of my father-in-law. So I went to the services, of course, with my husband, but also with our newborn and our 4-year-old son and our 3-year-old daughter. And I remember, and I'm sure you can imagine, I felt incredibly overwhelmed. I was grieving, but I didn't know what to do exactly with my children or how to allow them to behave. And it was just an extremely overwhelming experience for me. So guess who came to my rescue at that time? Of course, it was the funeral director. The funeral director was the one that valued me and nurtured me and gave me what I needed, the resources I needed to get through that. You see, as a kid out of college, I didn't understand the situation. I wasn't comfortable talking about death. But you fast forward these 10 years, and that's when I had a full circle understanding that funeral marketing could not be disconnected from the actual funeral experience. As you know, there is a deep connection the funeral business has with the individuals and the families in the community. Nobody knows that better than you. So you see, marketing should be an extension of the care and the value that already is being offered. It should be a pathway of resources that guide those who need it most. So my passion for the funeral industry was born out of an awkward conversation with the funeral director, but it was raised out of a determination to understand the why of the last responders and the how of the funeral ministry. So the Heartway system was developed by Story Collaborative to offer funeral homes with marketing that impacts your client family's lives. So that's what we're here to talk about today. So this workshop is called The Changing Consumer: Marketing Shifts, Opportunities, and Threats. But I am not here to give you the latest Facebook ad data or tell you the latest, greatest thing to spend your money on. Instead, I want to challenge your beliefs. And once we do, we'll be able to easily sort through the digital marketing confusion. So did you know that 95% of our decision-making is unconscious? And that's from Harvard. Meaning that we're going through the motions, kind of like a maze, without even realizing it. So the most basic example of this is breathing, right? Luckily, we don't have to think about that. But some other examples are maybe where we park our cars at work or what route we take to get to the grocery store. This is actually why it can cause so much anxiety for people to make complex and important life decisions. So much of what we do is automatic and doesn't even need conscious thought. That's also probably why it's hard for people to plan something that's really important, like a funeral, even if it's advanced planning. And of course, if it's an immediate funeral, not only are they going to go through grief, but they're also having like a shell shock. They are used to making unconscious decisions, and all of a sudden they're having to be thrown into a bunch of information and make a lot of decisions at one time. So it kind of is like we're in a maze. So has anyone ever heard the story of Theseus? Again, you could raise your hand, no one will see, right? But you can put it in the comments, of course, if you've heard the story of Theseus and the labyrinth. If you haven't heard it, this is a Greek mythology story, and the labyrinth was this elaborate, confusing structure. Its function was to hold a big monster named the Minotaur. The monster eventually was killed by the hero, Theseus. But the labyrinth was so confusing that anyone could barely escape after entering it. So if you know the story, Theseus did actually get out of the labyrinth after killing the monster. Well, how did he do it? Well, it just so happens that Princess Ariadne gave him a spool of red thread. So after he slayed the monster, it guided him right back out. So you see, the Minotaur wasn't the only monster that Theseus had to slay. He also had to navigate his way back out of the maze. So this story is an important insight into the minds of our families. It helps us figure out how we navigate the world around us. What are the monsters that we slay? What are the swords that we carry? And how do we manage the change that's all around us all the time? So when we have a problem or a monster that needs to be slayed, our brains have to make conscious decisions, like navigating a maze that we can't see. And that's why we need a red thread or a guide to help us find our way back out. So when our families are planning a funeral, they are in the maze and they need your help to slay their monsters. Because people have unconscious questions they're trying to solve, they need a guide to help set them free. So that's the beautiful thing about this story. And actually, every story, right? Because in every story, there's a hero who has a problem that needs to be solved and needs a guide. That's because our brains process everything as stories. People have unconscious questions they're trying to solve. You, the funeral professional, already have all the answers. So you basically have a map of the maze already laid out for them. So story is a map of the maze in our minds. So how are you helping your client families navigate this maze? Not only when death is occurring, but what about before? And what about after? What's the story we're telling about funeral services? Literally on our websites, in our social media, in our email messages, and at the front desk. As funeral professionals, it is our job to help families understand the story and then guide them on their way through the maze to slay their monsters. So I'm here today to challenge you and give you some core beliefs about marketing, shifts, and opportunities, and monsters. So there's 3 core beliefs to help us reframe the story in our minds, okay? So, number 1, visibility is in the heart of the customer. And you know this better than anyone. Humans are driven by emotions. This is why our decisions are unconscious. Studies completed by neuroscientists have found people whose brains are damaged in the area that generates emotions are incapable of making decisions. I thought that was fascinating. People buy with their hearts. Marketing should offer substance and value and reach them in ways that matter to them, because we're all navigating a problem that we are trying to solve. So I want you to think about your brand for a minute. I am not talking about your logo alone. Your brand is the actual feelings and experiences that families have when they interact with your company and your staff. What senses are brought out when you think about your brand? Are they emotive? Are they engaging? How do face-to-face conversations feel with your families? And does your marketing reflect those emotions? Number 2, in marketing, more is not always better. And this is a hard lesson even I had to learn, especially in my younger marketing days. We all look at what our competition's doing. We all want to know what the latest trend is. And it's kind of like we're checking off a box, right? When we add something on someone else is doing. But how does marketing fit into our maze? And how does it help our families make their decisions? Is all of your marketing part of your red thread, helping to guide your families out of the maze to win the day? When we offer more of the same, we are not differentiating ourselves. Instead, I consider it sliding into the sea of sameness, right? At that point, you're a commodity. There's nothing special. One of the golden rules of marketing is that a confused mind always says no. But the right marketing will eliminate your need for more marketing. And number 3, marketing as a commodity violates your values. So some consumers are searching for the lowest price, the cheapest cremation, the cheapest service package. But are those the families you're there to love and serve? Of course, yes, right? But I would also say that the care and values that you offer are not commodities, right? The real world reputation you constantly are working so hard to build matters just as much in the digital world as it does the real world. Your community should be able to understand and discover your quality of care and your leadership through digital marketing. And your online presence should always reflect you and the story that you're telling. But of course, it should also work to attract new business. So the good news is that your digital presence can match your story. It can match your brand. It can match your voice. It can help people through the maze, and it can meet their emotional needs. And the best news is that we can do it without wasting money or time on marketing that doesn't work. So let's talk for a second about your consumers. Consumers that you are marketing to are often referred to in the marketing world as target market. But to me, that kind of feels like stringing up an arrow and shooting it at something, right? A target market usually involves demographics like age range, how much money they make, how educated they are. But there's another term that we use at Heartway, and it's actually a really popular term throughout the inbound marketing world as well. And that term is buyer personas. You may have actually heard the term buyer persona. This is basically your avatar, right? It's a character on a journey. So for example, our avatar is Decisive Diane. And Diane, of course, she has her name, but she has a story to help us understand her better. So for example, Diane and her husband, Frank, are both retired. They live in Central Virginia, and her husband used to run his own business, and she got to stay home and raise the kids, pay the bills. But now that they're retired, she's trying to keep super busy in her church, keeping up with her grandkids. She loves traveling with her husband and stuff like gardening, exercising. She sticks to a healthy diet. Recently, she had to bury her sister, and now she's starting to think about advanced planning. So as she starts her research, she runs into her first problem. Her family doesn't want to talk about it. So as you can see, if we understand that the battle Diane is going through, we can help her through her journey. We'll know how to nurture her. We'll know how to give her value and resources to come to her rescue and help her slay her monster. We want her to get through the maze with your help, right? So that's where the buyer's journey comes in. So the buyer's journey has 3 stages. And I really honestly like to refer to them as cold, warm, and hot. Okay, so the awareness stage is when Diane is experiencing and expressing a problem. And she's starting to do her research to understand and give a name to her problem. So then she gets a little warmer, right? And that's the consideration stage. And that's when she's clearly defined her problem and really wants to understand all of the approaches and solutions for solving that problem. And then the decision stage comes in. That's the hot stage. And this is when they've decided what solution or product or strategy that they're going to go with. And now they're just compiling a list of vendors to decide who is going to help her solve her problem. So who are your buyer personas? From research, we know that some of your customers are already going to use you, right? They've already decided. They've had family members who've used you before, so they're going to use you again. But some of them have already decided they're not going to use you. Their family goes with a different funeral home, right? But then there's that middle group. Those are the ones who haven't decided yet. Research shows us that 17% of people call more than one funeral home before making a decision. So what else does research say about our potential buyers? So as we get into our next section of information here, I want you to picture in your mind Decisive Diane. What is she like? What does she need? What does she worry about? And what kind of battles can we help her solve? All right, so I want you to take a look at this illustration. If you haven't seen it before, okay, maybe you have seen it before, but if you haven't, I want you to actually call out what you think it is. And you can do this in the chat or just right here, you can do this. So if you said duck, you're right. But if you said bunny, you're also right. And if you saw both, congratulations, you are a genius. So let's say the duck, let's see if I can get it to, nope, sorry. My slide didn't work correctly, but so the duck is the way things are now. Okay, the duck is our current perspective on things, but the bunny is a new way of thinking about a problem. All right, maybe it's even a new solution. So the duck bunny is how we reframe a problem in our minds. So I'm going to actually take you through 4 duck bunny problem pairs that are going to help you make your own marketing decisions. So keep in mind, neither of these are wrong. The duck and the bunny are not wrong. They may not be right. They may not be wrong. They just are a pair. Okay. So problem number 1, online visibility. Okay, so we know that 7 out of 10 people search online before they call a funeral home. And we know that 85% read online reviews before making a buying decision. But we also know that 9 out of 10 of those people read responses to online reviews. However, there are 208 ranking factors in Google to get listed on the top search results. So 208 ranking factors. So for example, domain authority, the number of inbound links, the quality of your content, but other stuff too, like interstitial pop-ups. Okay, like what the heck is that even? So it can be really hard to rank organically in Google, and it can take a lot of money and trusting the right people to be able to do it for you. Because even if you rank number 1 and get all the traffic you want, are your visitors converting into leads? Or what I prefer to call them, new friends, right? Our new friends. So what do your searchers want? They want meaningful, valuable content interactions online. They want to see authentic responses to your Google reviews. They want to see the owner on video, right? So here we go. Let's give you your first duck. The duck here is that not enough families are finding me online. Not enough families finding me. But the bunny is families aren't finding what they want online. What do they want? They want humanity in your online presence. So here's some ways you can do that. Number 1, have your team members respond to online reviews. Have the owner respond to online reviews. This is something we have always practiced with funeral home owners, is to respond to their own reviews. And how do you do that appropriately? 2, offer meaningful online interactions, tools, and resources. So you don't just want to throw up a calculator on your website. Any interaction they have with you needs to be meaningful and authentic. So these could be anything like chatbots, right? That's a little bit more difficult for your environment, but has proven to be very successful in creating meaningful online interactions. Custom videos, live streaming, downloadable workbooks, articles. Use your imagination. And number 3, designate a human to post on social. So I'm not saying you can't or shouldn't automate social posts, but you should definitely designate a staff and team member to assist with that and to make sure that they are interacting online. And number 4, definitely want to try and rank number 1 in Google. Now, as we talked about before, that can be really hard to rank number 1 in Google. So I wanted to show you something. All right, for every page 1 ranking that you have, 60% of people searching will see your name. And more than half of click-throughs take place on local maps results. So this is an example. I did a search, funeral home near me. And as you can see, the very first thing that popped up was the Google Maps results. Now, as you can see, there's actually an ad. The first one here is an ad, not an organic result, but it's listed like it is organic. And then the 3-pack underneath are the next best, the closest funeral homes to me, according to Google's algorithm. Now, below this would be the actual organic results. Okay, so the best opportunity you have is to rank in these local Google Maps results. So I've compiled my 5 top tips on how to do that. Okay, and you can actually have this slide. I'll tell you how at the end. And it's very simple, okay? You want to complete your entire Google My Business profile. You want to regularly, like weekly at least, post more photos and post announcements on your business profile. Number 3, you want to have more 5-star reviews than the next guy. Okay, this is kind of like running faster than the other guy from the bear kind of thing. But you do definitely want to try to have more 5-star reviews than your competitors. And number 4, respond to those reviews. Number 5, adding content to your website on a regular basis actually impacts your Google My Business results. Your local maps results are impacted by that. So those are the top 5 things you can do. Now, if you have never done this before, which I'm assuming you all have, but if you haven't, I'm going to give you my email address after this, and I'd be happy to walk you through it at any time. All right, so let's go to number 2, post-COVID expectations. So we know that 7 out of 10 seniors are now doing their shopping online, and that includes both pickup and delivery. And we know that about half of people require funeral home pricing online, or guess what? They're not even going to want to do business with you. We also know that almost half of people say they will only arrange their funerals virtually, right? So in a post-COVID world, consumers have come to new expectations of the industry. And of course, as you know, the funeral services are just no different. So I'm going to give you a quick example. Have you ever purchased jewelry online, right? Okay, I want you to think about that as we introduce our duck bunny. I'm going to go back to that. So here's our duck. Our duck problem is I have to offer access to virtual experiences and information. Okay, my job just got harder. I have to offer all this extra stuff now, right? But the bunny is that all of our experiences should be meaningful, not transactional. So the virtual experiences are now an opportunity for you to offer meaningful online interactions, okay, but not transactional. Now, have you ever purchased jewelry online? Let's go back to that real quick. So they've made it so easy now to customize jewelry exactly the way you want without having to actually go into the store and see it and try it on in person. So funeral marketing should not be like that, right? You want to offer your pricing information online for sure, but you should not have it as an online shopping cart experience. There's lots of other ways to offer your pricing online that's meaningful and engaging and interesting. That's not like adding, your casket to your cart, right? You should also be offering families virtual funerals. Of course, most of you probably, if not all of you, are already doing this. And you definitely want to create meaningful obituary and condolence opportunities online as well. These can be anything like storytelling. People said in the surveys that their favorite way to remember somebody was to tell stories and share photos and remembrances. And so we can do that online. It's a very meaningful opportunity. All right, generation roulette. All right, let's play. So we know that boomers control a ton of our disposable income, and they spend a lot of money digitally each year. But Gen Xers are helping pay their parents' medical bills. They're taking on debt, and they're delaying retirement to support their parents. And in a few short years, there will be more Gen Xers than boomers. over half of Gen Xers are frustrated that brands constantly ignore them. Okay, it's kind of like they got skipped over. So the duck here, Gen Xers may be the new decision makers coming up here. Oh, wait a second. Gen Xers have already been making decisions and are feeling invisible. So how do we solve for that? I'm not going to dive into all of the Gen X personas that we could have, right? But it is really important to understand them. It's important to continue to serve baby boomers, of course. And we know that we can do that through Facebook and ads. Digital downloads, for example, are a really, really popular one for baby boomers. But we also need to understand and nurture the needs of Generation X. So what makes them tick, right? They use social media. They search and do their research a lot, and they don't want to be ignored. But it's also important to know that they value hard work, okay? They are a generation who has overcome hardships. Another interesting fact is that Gen X values financial planning and financial security, right? But they also prefer authenticity. So we need to understand what Gen Xers are dealing with, like what is keeping them up at night, right? What's haunting them in their own labyrinths. Let's go to number 4. Getting the first phone call. All right, so we know that 83% of people only call one funeral home. But 63% search online first anyway. Isn't that interesting? It could take up to 8 touch points to create a new customer. That's the second one here. Now, this is also really interesting because even in a digital world, right, where we have social media everywhere and a ton more opportunities to have interactions with people, it still takes up to 8 touch points to create a new customer. So this means, excuse me, this means that anywhere your digital glue is present, that's your brand. That's your website, your social media, your content, anywhere your logo appears. And it could also be your billboards, right? Your newspaper ads. Anywhere that a customer can experience your brand is a touch point. And it takes multiple touch points to create a new customer. Online reviews are far more important than referrals from friends and family. Okay, this is statistics right here, that online reviews are more important than referrals at this point in time. And the last one is at the end of 2020, customer experience took over price as key differentiating factor. That means that people will pay more money if they have a better customer experience, because that's really what they're caring about. So what do we do about all this information? All right, well, our duck here is, I need to be the first in Google to get the first call. Well, yes, definitely you do, right? But you need to be remembered and recognized to get the first call. So how do you do that? The first way is that you nurture your website visitors. What's interesting is that obituaries may actually be your first touch. I can tell you from personal experience that the vast majority of your website visitors are there for obituaries. Now, you probably already know that. But what you may not have thought of, excuse me, is that that is their first experience with you. So it's your first opportunity with them to build a relationship with them. Nurturing them means that you're giving them what they need to get through the maze, right? That's your red thread, the story you're telling them to help them conquer their monster. So for example, they might be having a hard time writing a sympathy message. So putting up a condolence guide on your obituary page for them to access. And if you want, you can even ask for their email address and start sending them other online resources every month, right? Now, that isn't necessarily going to create the first phone call, but it can guide them into remembering and recognizing you as their guide. So your brand should be held together by the same experience they would have as if they were with you in person, right? Imagine that red thread, right? So brand story, this is the second one here, okay? Brand story should be like glue. And everything you have is touched by it. Your website, your print materials, your emails, your social media, and the way you answer your phones. Uh-oh. There we go. Okay, so get ready for the duck bunny of all duck bunnies, all right? Here we go. Despite the problems with marketing we all know exist, the real problem is not finding value in marketing programs, but rather finding marketing that creates the value. It's not about what marketing can do for you, but what marketing can do for your customers. Don't get me wrong, ROI is very important, but the real success is measured in how many families that we help. So that's why we have to create meaningful experiences both on and offline. And to do this, there are 3 actions that you need to take, all right? The first one is nurture with value. Nurturing your current families with real and meaningful content they can understand and relate to, right? This can be articles, emails, this could be downloadable resources, or it could definitely be live or virtual events. The second thing you need to do is create online opportunities for connections. Give your client families the opportunity to connect with you on their terms. So again, this could be the chat feature. It could be online planning and scheduling tools, right? Let them take it into their own hands. And of course, all kinds of different media, text messages, emails, Zoom opportunities. It could even be virtual recordings that are available on your website from memorial services. And then finally, you need to help more families understand what you do and how it impacts their lives, all right? So you can do this lots of ways. Information, FAQs, pricing guides, seminars. It could be surveys, okay? There's so many things you can do here. Now, not only does this bring valuable new client families to the funeral home, but sustainable and meaningful relationships, all right? This makes you a market leader in your community. For those of you who are married or in a relationship, I want you to think about the first interaction you had with your significant other. Now, chances are they didn't come to the first date with a wedding ring, right? And get down on one knee. So you can't get to a wedding without a first date, right? Your audience needs to have the chance to get to know you. You are responsible to build a relationship with them. You can't give people value with strings attached. It should be given without expectation. And that's what I want you to see about marketing. So I have a couple of giveaways for you today as we wrap this up. And the first is a resource that we've designed here at the Heartway System that you can use for your client families. Okay, this is called Healing by Design, and it's a keepsake activity journal. This one's for adults, but we also have one for children with coloring pages. That one's called It's Okay. And this is something that you can print off for your client families or email to them or put on your website. The second thing I'd like to offer you is just a conversation. If you want to go over your marketing or ask me questions maybe you're struggling with something. Maybe you need to get on Google My Business. Okay, I don't care. Anything you want to talk about, totally free of charge. I want you to do that. So in order to get the Healing by Design and It's Okay books and to have a conversation, if you want one, I want you to email me. That's it. I just want you to send me an email. So my email is jennifer@story-collaborative.com. I also want to make it an offer for these slides. If you want my slide deck, I'm more than happy to email it back to you. All you got to do is send me an email and take the first step. All right. Thank you so much again for having me. I hope you enjoyed the presentation.
As consumers today, we have access to more information about our purchases than ever before. Funeral consumers, too, have more information. From websites and social media to family and friends, even hospice and healthcare professionals. Families who are faced with making funeral arrangements can get more information and more misinformation than ever before. And now, families walk into funeral arrangements with these ideas before they ever get the opportunity to speak with funeral professionals. From the time between the first call and the arrangement meeting, how much interaction and information does your funeral home provide to families today? What if you could reach families during this critical decision-making period to provide the right information to help families make informed decisions about how to celebrate the life of their loved one? Introducing Family Connections from Matthews Aurora Funeral Solutions. With Family Connections, you can provide each family with a private, password-protected planning website that allows them to understand what information to bring to the arrangement meeting, preview their choices for funeral services and merchandise, complete biographical details that you'll need for the death certificate and other forms. You can activate the Family Connections website from your smartphone using the Advisor app, so families have the information they need to prepare for arrangements from a trusted source, you. Your arrangers will have access to all of this information and preferences prior to the arrangement meeting, so you can focus on helping families share their stories and move from grieving to remembrance. To get started or register for a demo, visit our website.
A terrific panel of funeral professionals here today that are going to share some great insights into what's going on in the industry. So I'd like to start off by asking each of our panelists to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about themselves. So let's start with you, Evan.
Good morning. My name is Evan Strong. I'm the president of Evan J. Strong Funeral Services in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. I've been a licensed funeral professional for a little over 30 years now, and president of OGR this year and a member of OGR for a little over 15 years now. Thank you.
Great. Gregory?
I'm Gregory McCleary from Chapel of the Chimes Funeral Home in Westland. I've been an owner of that facility since 2009. I've been in the funeral business for over 40 years. My first license, I'm licensed in Indiana, Michigan, South Carolina, in New York, and I've been serving families that started when I was 10 years old around the funeral business, and that's been my life.
Wonderful. And Marty, we got to meet you earlier, but please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Certainly. My name is Marty Strohhofer, and I am the Vice President of Marketing and Product Development at Matthews Aurora Funeral Solutions. I started at Aurora Casket about 20 years ago and have been involved in marketing, merchandising, and technology initiatives and partnering with our customers and certainly OGR members for as long as I've been here. So pleasure to join everybody today.
Great. Well, thank you all. And we'll just kind of dive right in. I've got some great questions for you. So we know COVID has had such a tremendous impact over the past year and a half. How have you changed the way that you do business since the pandemic hit? Let's start with Gregory.
Well, the biggest thing we have really learned is we have had to listen more to the families because what they're going through is unprecedented. So we have had to just listen, hear what they are saying, see what they want, and actually provide what they need because we have looked forward, we have looked beyond just what families have come in and want. We have had to look at what they need, and it has just changed us how we interact with families has been the biggest thing in changing the way we do business.
Marty, how about you?
Yeah, from the supply side, fundamentally our business hasn't changed. We always are there to serve our customers, bring them caskets when they need, send them the urns when they need. But the little things have changed, like it has for so many. Our salespeople, our funeral service consultants, rather than being in the doorways of the funeral homes like they're accustomed to being, have had to reach out to our customers and help them by phone and by Zoom calls like this. And so those things have changed a little bit, but fundamentally we continue to stay focused on serving customers and doing whatever we can to help during this really unprecedented time.
Evan, how about you?
I think the biggest change has been our responsiveness to families. And I think Gregory alluded to the fact that we have to listen more and hear what they're saying. And I think we've had to be able to respond in different platforms and be much more adept in online opportunities, whether it's arrangements by telephone or Zoom or email. So I think we've had to respond where much more our profession was generally people would come to our facility and meet with one of our funeral professionals. And now with COVID, a lot of that hasn't happened across North America, across the world. So we've had to be more responsive and being adept and being adaptable to using those platforms, which in other businesses for many years have done. And I think we've had to catch up a little bit to be able to still help families and provide our services.
And they're probably here to stay for a while too, or forever. How has the rise in cremations affected each of you? Let's start with you, Marty.
Yeah, so, what we've seen over the pandemic, there were some kind of regional and localized rise in cremation where there was prohibition in more traditional services. But what we've seen kind of nationally is that there hasn't been a huge rise in cremations, really much more than has been over the last 15, 20 plus years. So we continue to focus on creating tools and training programs for our customers and for arrangers that help arrangers explain to families the choices that they have for cremation. And it starts with service. A lot of families just don't understand the choices that they have for service. So we've maintained our focus in creating tools, information, educational pieces that help funeral professionals explain the number of choices and the different types of choices that families have when they choose cremation.
Evan, how about you?
Well, we've always been in a traditionally higher cremation rate up in Canada, this part of Canada, and we generally in our community sit at 65 to 70% almost consistently. So I would say the numbers really haven't changed. They've remained fairly steady. I would say what we've probably seen is many more families that are choosing cremation, but because of the challenges we're in, are having delayed services and deciding to have things at a later time, at a later date. And I think the challenge more so has been working with these families and still giving them options and providing them with different ideas, to still have services, because I think it's very important they still do them. And I think many of us probably in our profession across where we're dealing, a lot of these folks have decided not to have services or time goes too long. And then they say, well, what's the point? Why bother? So I think that's been important that, we've been dealing with high cremation, but now I think the emphasis on is still important to have that service even after a delayed period of time.
Yeah. Gregory, how's it affected you? Oh, I think you're muted.
sorry, we have seen a rise in our cremation rate over the years, but what we have in that rise, we've probably had 98, 95% service, because we've found that even though people may have gone with the cremation, giving them that service was that last thing they could hold on, because in so many cases, we had people who were sick in the hospital, the family couldn't they couldn't go up to the hospital and things. So with that chance of just, instead of saying, well, we just have a direct cremation or memorial service at some other time, they still wanted that service because they wanted something to grab hold to. The least a service did that. So we saw a rise in the service, even when it was down to where we could only have 10 people, and the numbers moved up, but they wanted something. And then when we offered the live streaming, then the service just went up to almost 100%. If they did cremation, they wanted that service. And so we were just happy to be able to provide that as a part of our service.
Well, that's good to hear that, because I think that's what, as that trend continues, to be able to have those services after, as all three of you talked about. So as baby boomers are planning more funerals for themselves or for loved ones, are you seeing that they're showing a trend towards different preferences compared to what we've long thought of as the traditional funeral? Evan?
I think the baby boomers for a while now have been looking at different things. And I think that even with COVID and the challenges that we face, I think that's remained constant. I think it's been a while now, baby boomers have been outside that traditional realm of the funeral home, or having the funeral at the funeral home, or maybe they're at the golf course, or they're a community center in a park. So I think, if anything, what we've probably seen in our area is, again, as I think both Marty and Gregory have alluded to a few times, that the ability to do things online, that, the live stream, as Gregory mentioned, and it's increased the amount of people are having services because now people can watch them. So I would say for us, it's probably been that I think they're just looking to be more responsive online. And the other thing I found is spending more effort and time creating a nice memorial tribute on funeral home websites. You see, I think a lot more people putting emphasis on their pictures, videos, music, the live streams, because that's becoming the funeral in a sense for so many people, when there isn't something public to go to. So I think the boomers have been this way for a while, but probably embracing technology even more now.
Gregory, what have you seen?
Well, I guess the biggest thing I've seen is, and I remember one month we had about 15 families come in, and the people who were making arrangements was, 20, under 30 years old. And so they kind of still wanted the traditional, but they wanted to customize the traditional. They wanted to do something different that made their service a little different. They did the tradition because they knew that's what grandmother would want, but they wanted to customize to something that they wanted, even if it was just changing up the timing of the service, the old tradition music, the old traditional service. In fact, I found I've done 70 service from the standpoint of a certified celebrant, because people, they wanted just something to be a little different. And the boomers have been, I've spent a lot of time educating those boomers to what option they had, because a lot of them came in and didn't realize, they didn't know what options they had. They just knew they wanted a service, but they didn't know what they want. So we end up spending time educating. And by educating, we got a service. And if it was a tradition, good. If they wanted something customized, great. Or if they wanted the tradition with a little customized, we did it all. And so, and I see that's going to be the thing that they're going to want in the future. They want to satisfy the older people that's in the family, but they want something that they can say, this is what I did.
Marty, have you seen a trend in products?
Yeah, I would echo what Evan said about families moving more online. They want more information. I think families are looking for convenience. So does the funeral home website give the family the information they need to make informed choices? From the product side, one of the things that we've seen really strong growth in is in the form of keepsakes, personal keepsakes that families can take with them. And I think it might be a little about the psychology of when we lose somebody we love, someone is taken away. And so what do we have to take from the service, to take from this experience that we can keep close to our heart? So we've seen a lot of growth in personal or memorial keepsakes, whether it's jewelry or hearts or other types of personalized mementos that families and even extended families can keep to remind themselves of the loved one that they've lost.
There's a boom in that. Gregory, you actually touched on my next question, customization, which, another word for that would be personalization in services. And it's really a buzzword, I think, right now among the service. What are the type of personalizations that you're seeing in families, and why would you want to offer that? What's the benefit to you as a provider? So Gregory, let's start with you.
Well, as always, we're trying to always provide excellent service for families, and it's not just always in the casket, because we are seeing a rise even in traditional burial, that people want. They come in and they've been asking for, can I have the fingerprint, some type of jewelry with the fingerprint, because even though there's a burial, they still want something to hold on. So I see people want to, they want you to just, I guess, present to them everything you have, every options that you have for them. And one of the things that I would always hate to have is after a service and then somebody say, well, I wasn't presented with that option. So, and then it goes back to what I said, that people come in with a want, but we try to find out and to show them it's about also what you need. And so whatever it takes to bring that personalization, whether it's sometimes it's in jewelry, whether it's in pictures, and people are not just depending on, say, a cremation to want some type of jewelry, and so they're using every option that you have available. So I think it's very important that we continue to show them different options that of personalization that we have, and always be working to think of something new, because next week somebody's going to come out with something new addition that can be a personalization. So we got to stay online on what's available so we can present it to the family. So we've had a excellent go at it of trying to just open up and tell families all the things we have that we can provide for them. And then, like I say, find out what they want, because they may come in with some ideas, because everybody watching is online. So they see things that we may not even been doing, or they see things from other different parts of the country. And so we have to adapt quick to be able to offer them and not quick to say, no, it can't be done, but let's see what we can do to make it happen for you.
Yeah. Evan, what are you seeing?
Well, I think the personalization that we have, very similar as Marty says, and Gregory, there's the thummies, there's the different options we present to families. And I think the personalization is important because COVID has changed the way we grieve in a lot of ways. It's changed a lot of things. And I think the personalization, right now helps a lot of people grieve and go through that process of the loss of someone so that they can move on. And things have been disrupted the way we would traditionally do that, the visitation or the wake, the funeral, the burial, the reception. And many communities, we've had that stopped or limited, and then it comes back and it stops. So it's a constant go around of restrictions and what we can do and what we can't. And I think it disrupts that pattern. So I think with the personalization, again, has been important in terms of what we can give families. So I don't see it as much necessarily as a product, I think we're all providing good products and services, but that has become essential because, again, a lot of that's becoming a funeral. As Gregory knows, a thumbie can become a funeral for someone if they weren't able to do it. A picture, as Marty said, the memorial website or the memorial tribute on a website, the obituary, a lot of that is taking the place of what was the funeral. So I think we maintain that personalization and keep presenting options. And I think that's how we're helping people grieve right now in these different times.
Marty, I think you talked a little bit about it already, but like, how do you see your products adapting in the future to go with this personalization?
Yeah, so we've long had different ways to personalize our products, personalize caskets, personalize urns, personalize any of those types of memorial products, where we've really been focused. And I think it gets back to what Gregory was speaking about earlier about listening, and then applying what you listen to create a meaningful and personalized event. So the things that we've been focused on is, how do you help families see all the choices or options available to them? And so that's where we've kind of, we've got the corners and the panels and all of those things, but it doesn't do much good unless the arranger has the tools to listen to the family, understand what's important to them, and then be able to show them how that person's life and their story can come, to pass through the whole event, but the casket could be part of that. An urn could be part of that. Jewelry could be part of that. And so where we're really focusing now is we have all the kind of the tools and the trinkets to personalize things, but how do we help arrangers present them at the right way and the right time so that it's meaningful to families?
So definitely more challenging for arrangers. It's not just kind of the way that they did business in the past. Are you seeing interest in green funerals and burials increasing? And if so, what do you expect to see over the next 5 or 10 years? Marty, let's start with you.
So I think there is absolutely an interest in environmentally friendly products and environmentally friendly events. To be honest, it hasn't been a big boom. What we find is that in many cases, it tends to be driven when a natural burial cemetery or place of disposition opens. So as a natural burial cemetery or preserve opens in a particular region, we see more interest from consumers in that type of service and in the products that would accommodate those. But I'd be interested to hear what Evan and Gregory see, because from our side, we find that driven kind of less in the funeral home and more in the place of final resting.
Gregory, what are you seeing?
Well, I guess that's an area in my culture, in my area, that we don't see much of. In fact, I haven't had a green funeral. I've kind of prepared our staff for the possibility, but that's something we have not had to experience. And as Marty said, that a lot of times it's about, if it's a push from the cemeteries, but we haven't had actually a service. And I think for our area, that will not be an issue, I could say for next 5 years. It can change, but we haven't had that. Everybody has stuck with the traditional burial in the traditional cemetery. And so we haven't had that in our area. And my clientele and all my culture, I'd say.
Interesting. Evan, what about you? Have you seen any interest?
I think in this part of our country, very similar to what Marty says and Gregory, we don't see a lot of it. I think many people talk about it and many people inquire about it, but it hasn't really been a trend that I think we've seen grow very much. And we recently, one of our new cemeteries which opened now has a green burial area where, in essence, you're buried in a field. And I think there's been a little more interest in that. But I don't think we'll see it for a while. And I think in many ways, people are looking at different parts of the service they're having now and considering it green. I mean, there are some people that look at green as cremation, and even they know it's not. They look at it different from burial, or they decide that I wouldn't want my loved one embalmed or prepared, or maybe I'm not going to use the limousines to cut down on emissions. Like, there's a whole bunch of different ways I think people are looking at what they would maybe consider green. But overall, that fundamental philosophy of a green burial, I think similar to Greg and Marty, just not really seeing a lot of it right now, although I think it will grow, but I think it will be contingent on areas that are providing green burial space.
Interesting. So what's one significant change that's happened during the pandemic that you think is likely to stick around? So basically a forced innovation. Evan, what do you think?
I think it's the technology aspect. I think the live stream, the ability to live stream a visitation or a funeral or a reception or a graveside service, to make online arrangements, to focus on memorial pages on websites, I think will be what we'll see more of. I think people will still be reluctant, or in some areas still reluctant, to go to funerals. I think that will be for a while, even when we go through the 4th or 5th or 6th or 18th wave of what we're doing. I think there'll just be a certain amount of people that their comfort level will take a long time to come back, if it ever does. And we'll continue to see that technology aspect replacing some of what was the traditional aspect.
Yeah. Gregory, what do you think?
Well, it's going to be the live stream, and I think for one reason is not only because of the COVID, but convenience that gives so many people the option to be a part of the service. We're gonna see a rise, and I see that in the products that's available out there for families, and I see in cremation, just things like necklace and thummies. We'd have family with 1 in 25 necklace, or they want to divide the cremains by 4 or 5 different people. So anything that people can hold on to in this time, I think it's going to remain with us. The live streaming, and anything that makes it easy for them to still pay their respects, to still show their love, and actually to tell the story of their loved one. And I'm hearing more people want to. I want to tell the story about my mother. I want to tell the story about my loved one. And so we see more people wanting to let people know who their loved one was and how much they meant to them and how much they will miss them. And they want people to know that, and they want people to help them laugh, because I've seen, we had one funeral, the whole hour, people just laugh from the stories that they tell. So people want to tell the story. And I see that more, whether it's live, whether it's live stream or whatever, they want to tell that story. And we are encouraging people, mother got a story, brother got a story. Let's tell it, one way or the other. Let's get the message out.
I love that. Marty, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I have to agree with the comments that Evan and Gregory made. I think technology is going to be the thing that sticks in the form of making online arrangements. I think families want convenience. And so whether that's making online arrangements, whether it's pre-need arrangements or even at-need arrangements with someone online in a call like this, I think that that funeral directors who are used to having the family come into the funeral home and sit down and spend an hour or 2 hours planning that event, while I think it's very important still, I think some families may want to do it like we're doing this call here. And so we have to be adaptive to those things. And on the live streaming, I think what's interesting is thinking about how in the funeral event itself, thinking about an online audience in a different way. Do we just put the camera up and they see whatever is going on in the chapel? or as we see more and more families use live streaming and the remote audiences grow, does that change the way we do funerals a little bit to accommodate the online audience? I think that might be an area that we see some unique things happen here in the future.
Interesting. Yeah. So if you had one piece of advice for our members moving forward as we, I hate to say, get out of the pandemic because we're not out of it yet, but what would that be? Marty, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think to kind of say it again in a different way, it's to meet families where they are. It's to, don't be disappointed that families don't necessarily want to fit into the box that maybe we want to fit them in, that they might want things differently, and it might not be what we want as funeral professionals, but we have to listen to what they want as families and meet them where they're at. That would be the number one piece of advice to me.
Gregory, what would you add?
In every business, or you go in business, you have a business plan to succeed in your business. We have found out we have a culture plan, and we have designed a culture plan to build around our staff that we can better serve our families. One of the things we try to make sure we do, let's serve before we sell. And in that way, we got to use the tools that we have before us, the technology, but we have to do those things that bring that wow factor to the families, because they are grasping on something. Yes, they love the casket. Yes, they love the jewelry, but they still want that service. And so we have, as a staff, designed what we call a culture plan. You got a business plan to make money. We got a culture plan to keep serving families and also we are going back. Don't forget the families that you served in the past. We have been reaching out, communicating with our families from the year before COVID, and even those during that time, because we want to remind them we haven't forgot you. You've gone through a tough time, but we want you to know we buried your loved one last September, but we just called a check to see how you're doing. So our culture plan is to help build our staff to better serve our families. And we have families that we call back and they're just saying, I'm just so glad that you called to just check on us, because I don't know whether this has happened in other areas, but there have been some families who, when loved ones died of the COVID virus, they kind of felt that this was a disease that everybody is looking at them as, how did you catch it? Why did you catch it? So you got to let them know that they are not in this alone. And so we spend a lot of times in our culture plan bringing that extra touch or that extra reach to families. So I tell all of our funeral directors out there, keep reaching to those families you're serving now, but reach back and do something, say something to those families you have served in the past.
I love the idea of the culture plan. As busy as it has been for people in the funeral service, how do you keep your staff motivated to want to embrace that plan and to take those extra steps of reaching out to past people or listening more, some of the things that we talked about? How do you keep them motivated to want to do that when maybe there's a little bit of burnout?
Well, one of the things we found when this really got going and we was concerned, we could have sit around and say, oh, this is bad, what are we going to do? But we found a way as a staff to find something to laugh about. We would just take time some days and just find something to talk about that brought a laugh. So that kind of took the stress off of the staff of this, this is a bad time, what are we going to do? That took the stress away, and that to me was one of the biggest things that have helped our staff. And just laughing, finding something to laugh about, even if it's about some of the staff, things that their little children done, things that they done from their past. So it made them feel, okay, I'm gonna do my job. It's hard enough, but it's something to be thankful for, of what we have done in the past. And I can laugh about it. And I'm seeing by them doing that, it helps them to do their job better in serving families. And then what we also took from that is to see what we could do to make the families laugh. And we make it a point in our interview with families to stop from the business side and just ask them, what was mother's favorite hobby? What was mother's favorite flower? And in doing that, we begin to see people come out with stories to laugh. And so that has helped taken away some of the burden. And like I said, that's part of the culture plan that we have. And I would, sometime I would love to send you the layout of that plan that has helped. That has helped me, that has helped our staff, and we see it's helping our families.
Well, I'd love to see it, and I'd love to share it with our members, because I do think the culture plan and keeping the staff motivated is just as important as sort of the sales side of everything that you do. Evan, before you answer the innovation question, just going along with what Gregory said, what do you do to keep your staff motivated and feeling good about their jobs?
Well, I think all of our staffs have been through a tough time. I think there's been a roller coaster of emotions. There's been, in many cases, they have had a great influx of families they've been dealing with due to, COVID-related deaths, or even just the general volume of a funeral home. And I think as owners, as leaders, we really have to appreciate that. And as Gregory says, we have to celebrate our staff, and sometimes little victories and things to laugh at, and, celebrate birthdays, celebrate events in their families' lives, and I think more than anything, just thank them for doing a good job. I think we always have this culture that, we have to send notes, and we have to give bonuses, and we have to do staff lunches. And I think that's all good. It's all part of that overall thing. But I think just to tap someone on the shoulder and say, thank you for what you're doing, or, that family was very happy, or, things went well. And sometimes a constant acknowledgement goes a long way. And I mean, other things are important. Absolutely. We want to celebrate what our staff does, but I think to constantly be encouraging them over this difficult time, because I think we as owners sometimes think, gee, we have as a difficult time, we're trying to make staff work, and we're short of staff, and we have this and we have that, and there's a whole litany of things we deal with. But I think sometimes it's so hard to overlook the staff that's doing things for us, that's making our brand strong. And as I think as Gregory says, a culture, it's not only, I think, the culture of the people, it's the culture of the staff. And I think those positive reinforcements create a positive culture all around.
Well, because your cultural plan and your business plan won't work if your staff aren't motivated and behind it. And I think that's great advice to recognize them in the moment, and not necessarily feel like you have to wait till it's review time, or wait till you're giving them a bonus or the lunch or the birthday. So in that moment doing it. So so back to the innovation question, Evan, what would you say is the one forced innovation that's here to stick around?
Well, I think in terms of just the live streaming, the online opportunities, I think we're going to see more of that, more of people doing that. And I think, the advice that I would give to our members as we carry on, as we were talking about, is really just courage and focus. I think we need the courage to lead. I think we need the courage to get through these difficult times, being positive and as much as we can help people, and focus on, what the families want, what they're saying, what we're hearing from them, and realize that, it's hard to believe sometimes, but this too will pass. and we need to stay focused on that. But I think it takes a lot of courage, not only employees, staff, management, to to maintain that positive level of service and positive level of help in the face of changes in revenues, changes in what consumers are desiring, changes in what a funeral is.
Yeah, absolutely. Marty, what would you say that a company like Matthews Aurora or other suppliers, what can you do to help our funeral directors, our owners, lead with courage and make their jobs easier?
Well, it starts with doing the things that we do every day, which is serving our customers. The funeral professionals in North America here in these last 18 months have made tremendous sacrifices. And we can honor that by doing the same thing. In our factories, I never thought I'd see the day where I didn't know if we could make enough caskets, but really that's the way it's been for the last 18 months. And so our factories have been going 6 days a week. Our delivery staff has been spent, and we're there to support the funeral directors who are doing the same things for their families. And so, that's what's important to us is understanding that we serve a higher cause. Both Gregory and Evan and all of the members of OGR, and then we by association with them. We serve a higher cause of what families are going through, and it's no fun to not be able to take Saturdays off, or Sundays off even, but it's what we have to do, and that's our call to serve.
Well, I think that's important to note. Earlier when we were talking about personalizations and things that families are wanting, is for our firms to share that information with our suppliers on what people are asking for, because even if you don't have an answer to that right now, it tells you what you can be developing in the future to make life easier for funeral directors, or enable them to be able to provide those things that the families are asking for. So
yeah, we welcome those ideas, and that's something we enjoy, is that the pipeline between our sales consultants, our customer service team, and listening, like Gregory said, that they're listening to their families, we're listening to our customers to see how we can provide the products, but also the tools that help us all really realize these types of events for families.
And I think, Wendy, that we sometimes, as funeral professionals, we sometimes overlook the work that our suppliers are doing during this difficult 18 months. I mean, often, as Marty said, there are increases in supplies that are needed, whether it was PPE, whether it was caskets, whether it was urns. There's increases in thummies, which Gregory mentioned one family that wanted 25. That's a lot more than would normally quite often happen. So I think as funeral professionals, we sometimes forget, I don't think purposely, but we sometimes forget that, our serving our families and providing them with what they need has to come from somewhere. And, we have to do a shout out and acknowledge that, our suppliers have been putting in just as much time, just as much effort to make sure that we have what we need to help our families as well. So I think that's important, that Marty says, they listen to us, and, we have to acknowledge the hard work that they do as well, because it's a combination that gets all of this done. It's teamwork.
Two quick things. In this profession and in this tough time, and as you say about giving thanks to our suppliers, a few months ago, I took the time to fly out to our answering service provider, just to say thank you, just to see them. And it was like the greatest thing in the world I could have done to take the time out of my schedule to come and tell them thank you. Also, I feel that as funeral directors, and for years we have looked at it as my competitor down the street. We have to come out of that. We have to stop looking at each other as competitors, but look at each other as completers. We are in business to complete a service to better serve families. And I feel that not only that, we got to thank our suppliers. we got to thank each other, funeral directors. We have to let them know, you add value to families, and we are here to do anything we can to help you help serve your families. And in return, we hope that they are here to help us serve our families when the time to call. So this is a thing that if we are going to do the calling that we have been called to do, it takes all of us, and it takes all of us to just say sometime, thank you. And I thank you all and everyone who is listening for the excellent service that you provided for families, you provided for funeral homes, and you provided to the organization to help kind of keep us together as an organization to be able to better serve and to be able to learn from each other in serving. So we got so much yet to give, but it takes all of us working together to give it.
Well, I love that message with all the ups and downs that all of you have experienced over the past year and a half. I know that some things will change probably forever. Some things are here to stay, but I love ending with a message of gratitude. And it's a great way for all of us to leave this session, is to be thankful to everyone that's helped all of you get through this. So thank you very much for taking the time to spend with us this afternoon. It was really insightful, and I really appreciate you. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Pleasure.
OGR is excited to share with you an opportunity to engage young professionals from your firm. We're bringing together young professionals for a half-day YP Summit on October 7th. The summit will be held simultaneously in person at 3 different locations. Topics discussed will include communication across generations, appealing to the changing consumer, innovation is the answer, and young professionals, what we need to succeed. The summit is free for employees of OGR firms and just $25 for non-members. To register, visit ogr.org/YP. We're excited to announce OGR is adding 2 new study groups to our existing North America and Global study groups. The new East Coast and West Coast study groups will make it even easier to participate. Each regionally based study group will meet in person periodically throughout the year, starting in 2022, to explore ways to fulfill increasingly diverse requests for services, achieve profit goals, and attract new customers. If you're looking to exchange information and learn successful strategies from colleagues that can help you advance your funeral home to the next level, then joining a study group is right for you. Participation is free, but you must be able to pay for your own travel expenses. For more information and to register, visit ogr.org/study. Before I close out our program, I want to again thank our presenting sponsor, Matthews Aurora Funeral Solutions, for their support. I'm thrilled to introduce now OGR member Andrew Lose of Heartland Cremation and Burial Society. He's going to share one of his favorite cocktail recipes with you. You received a copy of the recipe in your email this morning so you can follow along. Once his drink is finished, you're welcome to stay and network with your colleagues for the next 30 minutes. Be sure to check out Andrew's episode of OGR's Digital Dialogue Series podcast. You'll learn how Andrew has adapted space in his funeral home for his very own speakeasy. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else you find your podcasts. Thank you again for joining us, and I'll see you at your table.
Good evening, OGR Leadership Summit virtual. I hate the word virtual, pandemic's still going on. I'm Andrew Lose. I'm the owner operator of Heartland Cremation and Burial Society in Kansas City. I've got 3 locations in the metropolitan Kansas City area. Been a member of OGR for 2 years. Made a lot of great friends, lifelong friends now. Just in the short couple of years. I'm so happy to be a part of this. I wish we were live. I wish we were doing this together. But what we've learned in the pandemic is we make the best of what we have. And so welcome to my basement bar. I thought I would never be one of those funeral directors that had a quirky hobby. Now that I'm an empty nester, I found myself wandering down the crazy rabbit hole of craft cocktails. What once started as an opportunity to try out some distilled spirits, craft beers, some good wine, my little crazy love of Polynesian tiki culture and tiki bars and mid-century modern led me to a world of craft cocktails, speakeasies, and home bartending. So a little bit about me. My wife is a fourth-generation funeral director, and like I said, we own and operate Heartland Cremation Burial Society in Kansas City. Awful proud of our company. We just celebrated last week our 20th year of founding. It started as a little small neighborhood funeral home that we saw the future of cremation coming our way in the metropolitan Kansas City area, and had a sleepy little suburban funeral home that we thought, wow, we could really lean into the trend that we're coming and become that first firm in the metropolitan area to really focus on that cremation customer, and it's been a great blessing to our family. So we're going to talk a little bit about a cocktail tonight that we were going to feature. You should all have gotten the recipe by now. And we're going to talk about the Humble Manhattan. The Manhattan's a great cocktail. Probably first made sometime in the late 1880s, early 1890s. It's a simple 3-ingredient cocktail. We'll talk about the ingredients, the build, a little bit how to make one. But I think the most important thing to talk about with the Manhattan is one of those cocktails that many craft cocktails kind of start off as a Manhattan. So as we build the Manhattan and talk about the Manhattan before we actually put one together and show you what one looks like, we'll talk about the parts, a little bit about it, and you'll get a chance to learn a little bit about the cocktail. We've got a short time together. I wish we had more, but we're going to enjoy this great cocktail. So the Manhattan, and we'll have a couple of quick tips throughout here. The Manhattan is a stirred drink because it doesn't have citrus, because we're not trying to emulsify anything. We're only going to stir to dilute the cocktail a little bit, and to chill the cocktail, we're going to make it in a mixing glass. We're going to strain it into a glass, and we're going to stir it over ice. So it is a cocktail served neat, no ice cubes, no single ice cube, and it's a very special glass. We'll talk about the glass here as well. The main ingredient, traditionally for a Manhattan, is rye whiskey. Rye whiskey is one of truly American spirits. Rye whiskeys were made as far back as the founding of our country. The founding fathers were probably drinking rye whiskey. Rye was the grain that was most prevalent in New England and the frontier at that time, Pennsylvania, and along the northern, the southern and middle parts of New York. So they would take that rye and turn that into whiskey. Vermouths, which is a aromatized, started out as wine, becomes a spirit after it's been aromatized and becomes a distillate. There are two types: sweet and dry. This is a sweet vermouth. Almost all vermouths are Italian. There are more than I can know, more than I can pronounce, but it's usually a red, sweet Italian vermouth. And then, like all great cooking, you have to add spice. Salt, pepper, spices is what makes a great cookie, makes a great recipe. In this case, we're going to use Angostura bitters, and it's most famous for its funny, crinkly label. It's always too big. You probably had an uncle or a grandpa that had this on their bar, made in Trinidad and Tobago, and they ordered wrong labels 60, 70 years ago and kept putting them on the bottles, and they don't know how they got messed up. And then we're going to add a cherry. So quick variations. It can be made with bourbon. This is my decanted bourbon, Maker's Mark or Knob Creek, just a good Kentucky bourbon. It can be made even more elevated with a single distilled, like a Willet, something fancier. Don't need to, because you're gonna have a lot of good flavors. And like we talked about, there are kinds of vermouths. This is a vermouth that's it's an Italian Amaro vermouth. There are vermouths that are made of different kinds of grapes. This one, called Punta Mas, is one that is maybe a little bit more plum, raisiny kind of finish. We're actually gonna kick this big bottle out because tonight we're gonna make a special one. That's one of my favorite Italian vermouths. And everybody knows this. You remember these posters that were really popular? I think they even had one in one of the friends' apartments or whatever. Anyway, this is cherry vermouth that's got a little bit of cherry in it. We've got Angostura bitters we're going to add, but we're going to add something else too. We're going to make our special. We're going to add cherry bitters. We're getting ready to come into fall, so I love cherry. So we have just short time, so let's build this thing together. We're going to start with our mixing glass. And we're going to start with either crushed ice. I like to use one big cube. It's going to keep it from diluting too much, but it's going to really chill. So we've got our jigger. This is kind of a Monterey cocktail jigger, 1 ounce on one side, 2 ounces on the other. So we're going to start with our rye, and I want to use this good Dickel rye. And we're going to do 2 ounces of the rye. I'm sure I'll spill this good stuff all over my bar. Cap that off. Then we're going to come back with this Maurin, which is a little bit kind of a cherry vermouth. It's kind of dark and red. That's 1 ounce. So 2 to 1, that's all there is for a Manhattan. We'll screw top that on. Now we're going to add the spices. This is just such an easy cocktail to make. I love this cocktail. So 2 dashes of Ango. It's kind of baking spices and very aromatic. It's delicious. And we're going to hit it with some cherry bitters. Come back and hit this with cherry bitters. 1, 2. And then we got our big fancy stir spoon. We're going to give this a good, really good stir like this. Get that cube working. It's already starting to melt just a little bit. Keep the spoon on the outside of the glass. Stir it around. Work that up. And the idea again is we've got a lot of booze in there, so we want to dilute it a little bit. Plus, water opens up the rye whiskey. It takes down that the alcohol by volume, the kind of hotness that people have when they try this by itself. So we're gonna get that chilled down just a little bit. Let that sit. And then we've got my favorite glass for a Manhattan. The traditional Manhattan in America today is served in this is called a coupe. And it's a full French glass that's become real popular in craft cocktails. I freeze mine so they're nice and frosty. We're gonna take our strainer, it's called a julep strainer. And we're going to pull this right here. Can everybody see this? And we're going to pour that Manhattan right in there real nice to the very top. This one's kind of not real dark because it's not real red. We're using kind of more of a ruddy vermouth. And then I have these cherries that are not your typical maraschino cherry. They're a little bit fancier, kind of in a sticky sauce. I'm going to grab my forceps. Everybody's got, those are around what we do for a living, unfortunately. I'm going to grab one of those. I can smell the amaretto. I'm going to hit that with a little pick here and get that little goo off there, set that down. And this is our variation. We're going to call this the OGR Leadership Summit Virtual Cocktail. Cheers. Wish we could be with you guys. Have a great summit. And if you want to learn more about my little hobby on Instagram, you can go to @TILDEATH @tilldeath. It's a funny little Instagram I put together with recipes of cocktails. It just kind of tracks my passion in the cocktail world. But I'm always available at Heartland Cremation and Barrel Society if you want to call me. And this is Andrew Lowe saying, cheers. I wish you were here. Bye, y'all.